How much does it cost to run a photography business? Knowing how much it costs to run your business is very important because it's typically more than you think. And this amount is what helps you determine what you should be charging your clients. So you're not paying out of pocket to take your photographs. Okay. If you want your business to last, it's really important to take responsibility to understand these costs. An important thing to note, however, is that costs are variable from photographer to photographer, meaning they're not the same for everyone. Okay. And so let's talk about what determines those costs. Hey, James. Oh my goodness. I can't believe that you're here. That's awesome. So, what determines valuable costs? First of all, your niche can determine your costs. Okay, it can determine if you need props in a wardrobe, if you might need a studio, if you might need particular equipment. Like if you're a wildlife photographer, for example, you're going to need a zoom lens versus maybe a portrait photographer who will probably be looking at a prime lens. Okay, if you're in real estate or weddings, you'll need to add a wider angle lens to make sure you can capture those smaller enclosed spaces. And if you're an adventure elopement photographer, there's a consideration of travel expenses. So your niche definitely affects your cost of doing business. Okay, your style of photography can also affect your costs. Okay, it can determine if you need things like flashes and lighting equipment or not. If you're a natural light photographer, you may just need basic flash equipment versus an off-camera flash setup. Okay, it can determine if you need particular presets. If you want to really stand out, it may determine that you need to hire a preset designer to create a series for you for a very unique, one-of-a-kind style. So there's all these variables that are going to make each photographer's expenses very different. Okay, so just to put some very basic costs into perspective, let's say you're starting a photography business, okay, and you think you might like to do maternity and possibly weddings. So you decide to get a camera with 2 card slots so you have a backup because it's a once in a lifetime event, right? Very important. So for example, let's say you get a Nikon D750. Now personally, I have a 750 and an 850. The 750 is a less expensive model, so let's go with that one, okay? And it's got a few less features, but it's still a great camera and perfectly suitable. So a Nikon D750 with 2 card slots is currently going for about $2,200, okay? And let's say we're going to get the most basic but versatile lens out there, which is your 50 millimeter, and that's going to range from $250 to $500. Now you need a couple SD cards, right? So we're talking about $35. So when you add those up, the total just to take the photos is $2,485. And we haven't even talked about a camera strap or a bag to put your camera in, okay? So you need to know how much it's going to cost to run your photography business. And this is one of the many reasons why it's so important to take note of what you're spending, because you can quickly see just by adding up these very few items that you may not be charging enough to even cover these costs. Okay. Now, some other reasons you need to know how much it costs to run your photography business are, it's part of the formula to know what you should be charging in your business. Okay. I'll hear a lot of people in Facebook groups say you need to be charging according to your cost of doing business. But honestly, that's only partially right. Okay. You have to understand that if you don't, it's just more than just your cost of doing business. If you don't have an idea of what you have to pay in taxes, or what you need to personally make to pay your household bills, save for retirement, and have things like healthcare, insurance, all those things that are important, okay? Then basing your fees on your cost of doing business alone will allow you only to break even, and then you're working for free. So please take note of that. Please take note of that, okay? Secondly, keeping track of the cost to run your photography business is also a record of expenses that you can most likely write off as deductions on your yearly taxes. Now, there's a lot of information I may refer back to about tax today, and just disclaimer, not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer. These are just things that I have learned a lot of way from my professionals. You need to consult with your personal accountant and or lawyer about these things, okay? But the majority of these expenses are also tax deductions, so you need to keep a record of that. So let's talk about how to keep track of your costs and why you should do that. Personally, I suggest that you keep a file on your computer, okay? You need to keep a file that notates all of your expenses and save that file. And I highly recommend doing this because number one, expenses will increase as you move from a photographer that's just starting out and not knowing what you need to an experienced photographer who has gained knowledge, or maybe you're just now gaining knowledge or gaining more knowledge about what you truly need to operate a photography business and the niche and style that you are in. Secondly, your needs may change, okay? So it's best to have a file that can easily be edited. You may decide to move from your free MailChimp email service to Flowdesk for a little higher end presentation to your email list, and there would be a change in cost for that. So you want to have an easily accessible, easily editable file. And number 3, this is your guideline for what receipts and documents you should keep for records so that when it does come tax time, you're able to deduct these expenses according to what the federal law allows and pay less in taxes, okay? The federal government allows businesses to deduct particular expenses, which lowers the amount of income we are taxed on. So, for example, let's say you earn $65,000 this year, okay? And you have $10,000 in expenses that you can deduct. You will be taxed instead on $55,000. This makes a big difference in our tax payments, guys. So not only is knowing your expenses of vital importance for you to understand what to charge your clients, it's also important for your bottom line. Jared says QuickBooks makes it easy. Yes, that's one option that you can do to do that. But this QuickBooks is more for actually, yeah, you're right, documenting the expenses and keeping track of that. But as far as having just a separate list of what those expenses are, highly recommend keeping that available and handy. Okay. So how much is it going to cost to run your photography business? Again, each photographer will have varying expenses, but let's talk about the areas of your business you need to consider for expenses so you can determine what your individual costs will be. And before I dive into that, do I have any questions or comments? All right. So let's start off with this. First of all, gear. We're talking camera bodies and lenses. These are not frequent expenses, but over time you may need to replace certain equipment or your needs may require more that you don't already have, okay? Also your accessories. So this can be flashes, light stands, soft boxes, umbrellas, even reflectors, bags to carry everything in. And don't forget your rental equipment. That is something that is an expense. Do not forget that. Take the time to sit down and record any and all gear that you are using. Okay. Also, marketing expenses, things like business cards, flyers, and banners. Banners are especially for if you are doing like a wedding expo and you have a table, you need a banner with your logo and your name, right? Facebook ads, featured vendor fees, like how many of you pay to be featured in a popular blog or maybe even in a magazine? That is an expense, okay? Also, operating expenses. Things like your website, software, apps, and programs. We're talking Lightroom, Photoshop, CRMs like Honeybook or 17 Hats. And don't forget your gallery delivery software, okay? I personally use Pixieset. There's all kinds of them, but just don't forget that. Our transaction fees are 3% typically. That's a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at your total income and you're processing that through a client management software and they're taking 3%, whether it's PayPal or Honeybook, that's a lot of money. And that is an expense. So you need to absolutely remember when you're calculating things like your cost of doing business or what you should be pricing your clients. That is something that some people seem to forget. And in a lot of states, you're not allowed to charge a fee for processing. I've seen that sometimes where people say processing fee, 3%. In a lot of states, that's not legal. You need to ask your local lawyer and accountant as to what the rules are in your location. However, most of the time, that's not something that you can do. That is a cost of doing business. You have to factor that into your own math and price to profit accordingly so you can help cover that expense and still profit. Okay, that's something a lot of people don't think about and do. It's very, very important. They try to get around it by charging a processing fee. That doesn't really feel very good for your clients either. So just a little side note, just work that into your cost of doing business and make sure that you're charging your prices appropriately to cover those expenses, okay? Your gear maintenance, cleaning and repairs, calibration of lenses, very important. That is an expense. Any office supplies, from office furniture to pens, papers, and planners. Your actual office square footage. That is something to ask your accountant if that's something you can count as an expense. My husband and I both own our own businesses. We both have our offices out of our home. So we have quite a bit of square footage in our house that is used for business only. So that is something that you, again, want to talk to an accountant to see if that's something that you should be counting as an expense for your personal individual situation. Okay. Things like bank charges, ATM fees, studio, if you have a studio, those expensive for the rent, utilities, water. Postal expenses like your PO box, stamp shipping, permits, that's another thing. Computer equipment, internet and antiviral software, and don't forget data storage. Your external hard drives, your cloud storage like Carbonite or Dropbox, those are also expenses, okay? Your vehicular expenses like mileage and tolls, that's another one. Professional fees like insurance, we're talking liability, gear, errors and omissions, and we're also talking health insurance, okay? A lot of times in most states, you can currently write off your health insurance premiums. So again, talk to your accountant because some of these things like your health insurance or maybe your cell phone, certain things that you might probably already have anyway outside of your business, the amount that you can write off, or if you can at all, and when it comes to taxes, really depends on how much income you're making as a photographer, like whether you're part-time or full-time. So again, that's a little caveat to that, but it is an expense that you need to consider counting and factoring into your cost of doing business. Even if it's not something that you can write off right now because maybe you're doing this part-time, you need to figure out what your goals are in your business. If this is something you want to do full-time and make it sustainable, you need to include these things in your expense list so you can start charging to make enough for those things. Don't wait till later, okay? Accounting and bookkeeping, legal fees. I really highly recommend, because everyone skips over this and it's just so dangerous. I really recommend taking your contracts, because I know most of you have probably purchased templates, and have a lawyer review them, okay? Because you will be shocked at what they will change to fit what meets the criteria for your individual location and state. Laws and rules differ from state to state, and these blank templates that we're getting, it's not enough. You need to have that reviewed. And those costs are a part of your doing business. It's just part of it. So consider that as well. Also, licensure with your state, your county, and your city if need be. That's an expense to write down. Continuing education, like courses, books, professional publications, any association dues and expenses. A lot of people don't count those as an expense, but that is, especially continuing education, you should always be doing that. And that can be quite costly. We know how much courses and masterminds and things like that are. It's very important to count that into your cost of doing business, okay? Styled shoots, subcontractors. If you hire a graphic designer, a social media manager, a second shooter, or an assistant, whether it's in person or virtual, that needs to be added to your expense list, okay? Your phone, like your cell bill, the phone itself, any accessories like your phone case, any of those pop sockets, screen protectors and chargers, and cords, all those are an expense. Your cost of goods, if you offer prints, albums, frames, any product that you're purchasing for resale is a cost of doing business. Also, oh, let me see. Millie said, yes, the person who prepped my taxes asked me for the square footage of my home and my office that I use. Absolutely. Absolutely. Travel and entertainment, record your lodging, meals, tips, parking, car rental, airfare, client gifts, and mileage. That is an expense as well. And then some miscellaneous things like charitable donations, copyright and trademark fees, props, backdrops, client clothing, and accessories, okay? I know this may seem like it sounds like a lot, but please don't let this overwhelm you. The point is that, there may very well be less to keep track of for your own business, or there may be more. But again, the point is being aware of what you need to consider documenting as an expense so you know your total and you know what you need to consider when charging your clients. But also you know what you can deduct when it comes tax time, okay? So after looking at what it costs just for a camera and a basic 50mm lens and a couple of SD cards, you can clearly see how the yearly expenses of a photographer can range anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 and beyond. To calculate your own, what you need to do is add up all the expenses that you have throughout the year. You may need to make some estimates on things like gear and continuing education, and that's okay. Just round up, always round up. okay? It's better to round up than to realize you're in the hole, all right? Once you have a total, you can see what you spend per year. And if you divide that by 12, then you can see what your cost of doing business is per month, all right? That is what you need to be making minimally just to pay your expenses. You haven't even profited yet. You're not even paying your personal bills yet. So that's why I brought up earlier when I see people in groups saying, hey, you need to price your business based off your cost of doing business. It's not just that number, guys. There's a lot more to it. But this is an important part to understand how to get the number that you need so you can price appropriately so you can profit. Profit is not a bad word. Profit means you're paying your household bills and you can retire one day. We got to quit equating profit to a negative, sleazy kind of salesman thing because it's not what it is. It's not what it is. Okay? Running a photography business is not cheap. And this is why it's so important to know your costs so you can make sure you're pricing yourself above that cost and making profit so you have a business that will last. All right? Do you guys have any questions or comments? I wanted to give you somewhat of a comprehensive list of expenses and just give you a little background on how much it really costs to run a photography business. Because when you realize those numbers, oftentimes you realize that what you might be pricing yourself at may be off, a little askew. And you can see why when you see so many people, especially when they're starting out, going into Facebook groups and asking, hey guys, I just got someone inquiring for my first wedding. I have no idea what to charge. What do you guys charge? You can see very quickly why that does not work and is not a good idea. Because a lot of times what happens is, number one, people are not running their numbers. They're taking a good educated, I don't know if that's the right word, educated guess. Or they're just, leaning on what others are charging. Okay? And even if they are doing their numbers, even if you're looking at someone who is doing their numbers, their expenses are probably not the same as yours. And their personal needs to pay their bills are definitely not the same as yours. No two house payments are alike. No two rent payments are alike. No two grocery bills are alike. Okay? And it's the same in business. No two businesses' expenses are exactly alike. And that's why it's so important to know your numbers. All right, guys, any questions? Because that's about it. It may seem a little intensive. It's not. Take things one piece at a time, but start making a file that writes down and just write down all the things that you know that you're spending in your business. If you have questions, message me. I'm happy to answer that for you. But I want you guys to start understanding the why behind your pricing. Because I know there's so many photographers out there who feel uncomfortable about what they're charging. But honestly, it's because you don't know why. And when you see the why behind it, you're going to value what you do more. You're going to value the price point and you can feel more confident about it more. Does that make sense? It's building your confidence. And you can't build confidence about when you're trying to talk to clients about how much you cost if you can't back it up. And when I say backing it up, it doesn't mean that you're going to sit and explain to them what your costs are, because that's not something you need to be doing. But you're backing it up in your mind and your heart to feel comfortable with what you're charging. This is a luxury service. It is not a need. Photography is not a need. It's a luxury service. What the need is about photography is that you need to make an income so that you have food on the table and you have a future. Just making your bills is not enough. You deserve to have health insurance. You deserve to have retirement. You can't carry that heavy equipment your whole life. Things happen. We get sick. We get injured. You never know. I did a simple roll of my ankle on a hike a couple years ago, and I broke both my leg bones at the ankle and partially tore a tendon. I have a plate and 10 screws in my ankle, and it took over 18 months before I really started getting back to some semblance of normal. And in that process, I also broke my thumb because of my ankle. And that took a good 4 months before it was right. And I'm an artist. I used to be a dental hygienist, and I'm a photographer, and that took me out of the game for a while. So you need to understand that there is a reason behind what you do. There's a reason behind your pricing. And there is an absolute, you have the right to have a good life and a good business. You need that confidence. If you want your business to last, these are important things to consider. James said that's something I've struggled with, wanting to have a successful business, provide great service, and also be understanding of other people struggling in their own lives too. Yes. And I've said before in the past too, you need to charge what you need to charge. It is a luxury business. This is nothing that no one needs. So we need to start off with that mindset. Okay. This is a luxury. Are there people out there who can't afford photography but deserve to have photos of themselves, of their family? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you can volunteer your time outside of your business hours at all kinds of events and galas where you can offer services to people in need, and maybe have a mini session day where you can serve, maybe single mothers who are struggling, and provide your services. Get in touch with your local community organizations and services that help people in need, and see if you can set up a mini session day. Just get creative. There's all kinds of things that you can do. But if you're constantly feeling guilty about your price point throughout your whole business process with every client that you meet, you're not going to be able to have a sustainable business. Again, I don't understand why all of us don't feel guilty when we get a paycheck from someone else, when we bust our tails for somebody else and they hand us that paycheck at the end of the week. We're like, yeah, that's awesome. Great. Pop it right in the bank. We don't feel guilty saving some of that money for retirement. We don't feel guilty saving some of that money so we can go take a vacation with our family at the end of the year. We don't feel guilty about that. Why do we feel guilty when we give ourselves a paycheck? We need to think about that. So to overcome this emotional feeling, that we have of concern, guilt, or feeling sorry for others, or having empathy for others, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's just a lot about your character when you care for other people. But if we sit in those feelings in our own businesses, we're not going to have a business that stays with their doors open. The doors will close. So that's why you need to understand the why with your numbers, the why behind your pricing. And then you can make an income and have a business that you love. And when you're thriving personally and financially, that is the point where you can effectively help others. So I hope that makes sense. Because if you're not helping yourself first, how can you truly help others? If you are not 100%, you cannot be 100% for others. So please, guys, think about that for me. Okay? All right. If there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to put a poll so we can talk about, let you guys talk about what you want to hear next time from me. If you're not following me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, you can find me at all those places. Becca_Rock Your Rebellion is me on Instagram and TikTok. YouTube is Rock Your Rebellion. I would love to see you guys there and connect with you. So I hope you have a good day. Let me know how this helps you. I'd love to hear what you're finding when you add up these numbers. I want to hear from you. Let me know if the number was larger than you had expected. Let me know if the number makes you a little bit nervous and you're not sure what to do about that. Let me know, guys. Okay? I hope that you have a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.